Okay, good morning, Claude. I'm glad that you,
Good morning.
good morning. Glad that you have some time to talk to me today.
Oh, my pleasure.
Thank you. I like your background there. It looks like a Van Gogh picture.
Oh,
What is
this
that
this
about?
is a this is a graphic taken from a pastel that E.J. Gold produced actually quite some time ago. It's from Cosmo Street, which is a location in Los Angeles where he ran groups in the, gosh, when was it? Late 60s, early 70s.
Really? Wow. That was an interesting time in LA, I guess.
Yeah, it was very interesting. It was very interesting in San Francisco and many places. It was the opening up of some things that had been more rigid and suppressed for quite some time.
Mm. So, Claude, could you talk a little bit about you and EJ Gold so we can have some kind of informal presentation of who you are?
Um, I first encountered uh, EJ's work material, his teachings, when I was in graduate school in Florida. I was involved in a PhD program using quantum mechanics to look into uh, biological systems. It was rather new at the time, as part of the molecular biology department there. Molecular Biophysics was the department, actually. And I was in a Gurdjieff group, not an official Gurdjieff group, a Gurdjieff group
Not
ran
from the
by,
foundation, not from the foundation.
not from the foundation or from Bennett or anything anywhere near official. It was just a group of people that had read some books and they wanted to do something about it. And at the time, if you weren't in foundation, there was precious few exercises available.
Mhm.
Um, if you look at the bookstores now with the proliferation of books and exercises and study material, it seems weird to imagine a time when there was almost nothing. I mean, at the time, DeRop's Master Game was one of the few books out in, I guess you could say, open publication.
And
So,
that would make more valuable too for the people, right? When they knew some information, that would be the sense of value would be much higher than now, I guess.
well, the flood that we're having now um, is, I don't know, it'd be like, well, there's just so much you can't find what you need to find, except you find what you do find and do the best with it that you can. Uh, there wasn't a lot to choose from, but the stuff that was there was pretty sweet. It was anybody that published at that time, they were doing it because they felt a need to. They felt it was a service because we were in a sweet spot in between the earlier um I didn't I don't have access to memories of what was happening during the late 19th century and the early 20th century, but most of what you could find was highly organized, various organizations, and they pretty much put their material out for those folks that were part of their organization. You would
Are you
become a
talking about
member.
like are you talking about like secret societies or not?
secret societies, but also some that weren't so secret, but they were societies nonetheless, like Theosophy
Right.
is one such,
Mhm.
Blavatsky and her gang.
Mhm.
So that was a time when you basically subscribed to a curriculum. You subscribed not by, modern notions of subscription. You just bought into the society and you took the path that they laid out in front of you.
And maybe like learning by correspondence by mail, right? At that time.
Um, how did that work? I don't know. I don't know. I think there was local groups, and the local groups were fed information and training from national organizations.
Mhm.
Um, Paramahansa Yogananda was one of the
Oh,
early uh, correspondence course folks, along with the,
he was in LA, right?
yeah, they had a place in Los Angeles, and
Huge.
I took some of their correspondence courses back in the
Oh, you did.
um, late 60s,
Maybe
67.
You and Steve Jobs, right? Because he
Oh,
was
I didn't
into
know he
him.
did.
Oh yeah, in his biography, he was really into him. Yeah.
Well, they were,
I don't know if he did correspondence. Maybe it was in person.
could have been. I don't know.
Yeah,
I haven't read his bio.
it's pretty cool.
Um,
So you're
and
talking about you and EJ Gold, like who you guys
well,
are, you know the story.
the divergence for that little conversation came in the sense that I was describing how sparse the material was in bookstores and readily available uh, outlets. And when I was participating in this Gurdjieff group, we didn't have anything. All we could do is read the books and talk about the books. Then one day I came across a book that EJ published called Secret Talks with Mr. G.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
that was the first book that had the living material in it. And I quickly purchased all the books that they had at the time, which then was about five. And I mean, now it's like 120, some huge number of books that they have available. But then it was five, and it was five.
This is 120 books from EJ.
No, that's including some Durant books. Gateways has um, worked to keep Durant's material available. Also, there's some um, other writers.
What is the RUPS? What is the RUPS?
Robert Durant,
Yeah,
he
what is that?
was he's somebody that you should touch base with. His
Oh yeah.
material's old, but Warrior's Way is one of his books. Master Game.
Mm, I think Warrior's Way is kind of familiar. Yeah. So it was 120 books about the Gurdjieff. Uh,
No, no, not really. No.
no.
Um, Admittedly, during the 60s and 70s, EJ's material looked like it was Gurdjieffian, but it wasn't. It was his material that had some parallel with Gurdjieff's material. But that's because, I mean, if you talk about physics, say Newtonian physics or quantum, any physics, if you know your physics and you talk about physics, then it's going to look like the same dialogue from another physicist that knows the physics and talks about physics. So there's overlap. It doesn't mean that there's a chain. It just means that you're looking to the same topic. I mean, if you describe an apple and I describe an apple, depending on, what type of apple it is, we're going to be talking red, we're going to be talking, flavor and seeds and stems. It's going to look similar.
And when you talk about something more abstract, like a philosophy or a worldview like Gurdjieff, would you say this is like tap into the Akashic records or morphogenetic fields,
Um,
like from Rupert Sheldrake, like something that is in the air that somebody channels the same information?
that that could be. I mean, that's something that could be, but I that's not EJ's method, and it's not my method either. Um, EJ actually um, came into this on incarnation fully realized.
Really?
So he basically brought a library with him. My method is more just looking at what I'm experiencing, looking what's there, and spinning off from that. I I have an appreciation for the immense capacity of the human brain to make stuff up. We can fill in gaps so well. They've done experiments. This was in the area of witnessing, uh, in terms not of, Christian, but witnessing in terms of being on the stand in the jury, listening to what you say about what happened.
Mhm.
So there's been experiments done to find out, well, how reliable is that and what can go wrong? And there's one experiment I recall where a young child who had not been to the zoo with their parent is shown a doctored photograph that shows them at the zoo with the parent. Now, one way to handle that would be to say, wow, okay, I didn't remember being there, and leave it at that. But no, they looked at the photo and then they went off on a huge rambling reminiscence of what they did. And they went to the lions, they went and saw the monkeys, they went and bought some treats. Their
How
brain
old,
filled
how,
in.
how old was this child? How old was
I
this
don't
child?
know. Adults do that as well.
Of course, yeah.
You can check on YouTube for street videos where people are asked outside of a uh, music venue if they know any, if they've, are they excited that the Purple Grapes are going to be performing today as a mystery band? And I'll say, no, I heard about that from a friend who got advance notice. And then they ask them, oh, what do you know about the Purple Grapes music? Have you ever been to their concerts? Oh yeah, I go every time.
People
There is
don't
no
like
Purple Grapes.
to look like ignorant, like they don't like to look that they don't know.
But they fill in so much detail. And when you hear them talking, some of them, maybe they're making it up and they know they're making it up. But others, it's like they're pulling it out of some reservoir in their brain that's saying, oh yeah, this happened. So I don't trust voices in my head necessarily.
That's a
And
good thing.
when you get down to it, a lot of what we experience, if not everything we experience, is visions and voices and thoughts. And all of those are augmented. They're able to be manipulated by ourselves or by others. And I'm
Would
just
you add
cautious.
would you add to this little list you gave emotions too?
Oh, absolutely everything that transpires, everything you experience is being fed through a system which makes it available for attenuation, first of all. I mean, if we look at just optics, but this is true with hearing, etc. But if you look at vision, we don't see into the infrared. That's the low end of the spectrum of electromagnetic radiation. We don't see infrared. Now, some people see little hints of infrared, which is very unusual, but they do. Snakes can see infrared. We don't. So if you take the little portion of the electromagnetic spectrum that is called visible, it's like a little slice in this, massive bandwidth. We don't see ultraviolet
Hmm.
typically.
Hmm.
So we see this narrow little band. So we're having a lot of input unavailable to us. I call that attenuation. It's being restricted. Um, just by the nature of biochemistry. We're seeing because molecules in our eyes are reacting to light, and those molecules only react within certain frequency ranges.
Hmm.
So that's the attenuation. But then we don't see that. We don't actually see the light coming in. That is collected and then it's stored in the brain. And then we internally look to that storage data. Now, when it's stored in the brain, it can be augmented. If you look around for uh, videos on optical illusions,
Hmm.
the
I was.
optical illusions typically are because of the mischief the brain's getting up to.
Hmm.
There's a fun one where they have a cube, and this cube is made in a three-dimensional. It's flat on the screen, but it's made to look three-dimensional, and it's three different colors of gray. And then they ask, well, are those grays different? Oh, yeah, the one over there is much darker than the one on top. Much. It's not just a faint difference, it's very visible. Well, they put a patch of color over the top one, in like in the center, and you go, yeah, that matches. And then without taking the patch off screen, it's the same little, 5x5 card of color. They drag it down over the dark section, and lo and behold, it's dark. That's because evolution has engineered our brains to enhance three-dimensional nature so that we have an even better opportunity to see in 3D. Why? I suspect it's because somehow that helped with survival. Um, there's other factors like that where what to now is a fun optical illusion was originally built in as part of a this works better mechanism.
Hmm.
Now, that's an augmentation, that's an alteration of visual data. But this happens with everything, either through attenuation or through change, which means we're not experiencing the so-called real world. We're not even getting the data that it's sending. We're
When you
getting
were saying
something built on that.
attenuation, when you
Say
say
again?
attenuation, when you said attenuation, I had this idea that psychological trauma that makes the person have less memory of an event or not access to the full memory. That could be an example of attenuation too, when the memory is like decreased instead of increased,
or increased, both.
decreased or increased.
When I was 16, I was driving and I was hit by a car that ran the red light coming from my right side for a very long time. For decades, I was hypersensitive to fast moving objects on the right because in that one few second episode, my body became stimulated to build in a sensitivity to fast moving objects on the right.
On the
So,
right only. If something comes from the left, but okay.
well, yeah, then it would have built one for the left. Then I could go into overwhelm and be freaked out by any fast moving object. So,
You're gonna be
yeah,
like the whole day inside your room. Like,
well, it's like there's a post processing department in our heads. And when things come in, the post processing department manipulates the data as a way of giving us an advantage. Thinking takes quite a while in terms of making decisions. If we were basing our survival on our ability to make decisions, we would be toast. Um, when you're walking around outdoors in the United States and you hear a particular kind of rattling sound, you don't hear the rattling sound and say, "Oh, I've heard rumors of a thing called rattlesnakes. I wonder if I should be cautious." That does not happen. That's not the process. You hear that rattling sound and you actually notice the rattling sound while you're already in the air jumping backwards.
mm.
The body made its decision. It didn't rely on the brain to decide what was happening because it needed quick action.
That's what Gurdjieff talks about the centers, that the intellectual center is way slower than the emotional and the body, right?
Yeah, which is correct. I mean, if you talk to anybody involved in high-level martial arts, they'll get around to talking about the fact that they have to push the forms into the body because they can't be thinking about it. Musicians, the same thing. When it comes time to play a C chord, your hand has to know how to do a C chord, not your brain. And that's one of the things that musicians need to do at some point is to make sure that when they're playing music, they have an inspiration and then it translates directly into music. It doesn't go through the brain. Because
Mhm.
as you say, the brain is slow, relatively speaking.
That's the magic of artists, right? The magic of doing something directly without being filtered by the intellectual center.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of magic when it comes to creative activities like art.
Mhm.
Um, I find they're the one of the easiest gateways to mindfulness is doing art. Um, and they're also a good mechanism for finding and gently processing out certain glitches.
What do you mean?
Well, if if you start, we'll say drawing, and because this is true in every artistic endeavor, whether you're painting rocks with smiley faces to look like frogs, or you're doing pencil drawings of bowls of fruit. It doesn't matter what you're doing, eventually things will come up. you'll find that there's something in the way. Considerations, for example, if you're drawing and considerations, oh my God, I'm so lousy, I'm so bad, I'm so unworthy, and any considerations like that, suddenly it's not just I'm feeling down about myself. It's no, this is in the way of me being able to draw.
Mhm.
Because your head gets quieter, and when it gets quieter, that becomes noise instead of background. It becomes very loud, prominent noise. So it's there, and if you persist in drawing over the course of that time, which may take a while, but it gets handled one way or another. Either you learn how to dismiss it, you process it out, or whatever you do something because it's in the way of something that you are um, actively working on.
And
Now,
as you get in touch with that silence, so to speak, you get rid of that noise or you don't put attention on it, you open up your channels to something much higher, right?
I I wouldn't myself, I wouldn't put those names on it um, because I don't really know, and I haven't established a need to know what precisely is occurring. I My approach, let's put it that way, I'll backtrack. My approach to dealing with pretty much everything is to find a way of dealing with it and then not worry about what it is that's happening. Um, I don't need to
It's
know.
like
It's just,
there is almost like an automatic need or urge to make sense of it through the intellectual center, right? I can see that happening in me, you know. And
yeah,
you
well,
manage to not give so much importance to this, right?
my my physics training helped with that. I mean, when you start out, they give you one framework, one picture of what's going on in science and physics. And then typically in high school, you'll get one vision. Now, when you get to college, they say, you know what, that was kind of a lie. They don't call it a lie, but it's the way they phrase it is here's the actual truth. And then they paint another picture for you of what's going on. And that works for freshmen and sophomores. And then somewhere around junior or senior, they say, well, here's a better picture. That picture wasn't actually what's going on. It just works when you're looking in certain limited areas. And then you get to graduate school, and the first thing that happens is you find out that that's not actually the case. I went through this, through about 5 or 6 different, oh, by the way, that was wrong and this is right. And one day I was standing in my office. I uh, I did pretty much all theoretical. I did some experimentation, but it was mostly theoretical work. So I would spend hours with equations and trying to put this together to figure out what was going on.
And when you say theoretical is mathematical,
Yeah,
mathematical.
it was advanced math that I was working with because it was all quantum mechanics. So it was integrals and, you know, couple differential equations, things of that sort. And I was standing there and I realized it's never going to end. No matter what picture is painted for you or you paint for yourself, that's just the picture of the moment. It's not actually what is there. Now, at the time, I didn't have much behind that other than this realization that, oh, there's nothing that's going to be the forever truth. It's going to be the truth of the moment, or the truth that's working in this circumstance. And one of the reasons for that is that the part of me that is talking about that, whether it's talking out loud or whether it's, the little voice in my head that's talking,
Mhm.
saying, oh, this, F equals ma, just the words and the pictures. That's all part of the phenomenal world. It's limited by language, and it's limited by human experience. The true, real world is not limited by human experience. It is what it is. Is it something that is never changing? Or is it something that changes? I won't know. Because for me, the one that's speaking to you right now, it changes for me or it doesn't change for me based on this interpreter.
Mhm.
It's like there's a joke in involving translators in meetings of various sorts,
Mhm.
and the funny part of it is that the one executive will make this very long speech, and then the translator just repeats like 4 words, and
Mhm.
the executive one, what is going on with this? Then they'll just say like the executive will say 1 or 2 words, and then the translator goes on for a page and a half. It doesn't necessarily match up.
Mhm.
So this translator that is trying to quote explain everything, it doesn't work. And when
Mhm.
you deal with quantum mechanics, which I did, I was pounding my head against the barrier of understanding of quantum mechanics for quite some time.
And that was early on in the game, right?
Yeah,
Like,
it was fairly early. It was back in the
mhm.
70s. Oh,
I
what
would
they have
say
available
like,
to me now is so much better.
so when did they just start exploring the quantum realities? That was in the 50s or 40s?
No, no, it was uh
Oh, early. Yeah, it was early.
the early 20th century.
Mm.
Went through Bohr, Heisenberg. A lot of this was 20s and 30s.
And then it got really hot during the Second War, right?
Yeah, well,
Mm.
yes and no. There was a lot of effort put into it, but that was mostly engineering. They wanted to build a bomb.
Right.
So they were studying what they needed to study in order to engineer a bomb. But it stimulated the whole field. And then the theoretical nature of quantum came out. And then they were working with the experiments. And the thing about quantum mechanics is you don't really learn what it is,
Mhm.
learn how to work with it. It's like, what's the deal with quantum and superposition? And there's some folks that have an amazing vision of quantum. When I say some, I mean a handful on the planet. I don't know what it's like in
Still
their head.
alive or in the past? Still alive?
Well, the ones that I know were in the past.
Mm.
Paul Dirac, he had an office on the campus where I was in graduate school. And you could look out the window in the morning and watch him on his walks.
Wow.
And he was utterly brilliant. Feynman, totally brilliant. But still, the general nature of quantum mechanics is we live in a Newtonian um, classical physics kind of experience.
Mm-hmm.
But quantum doesn't behave that way. It's doing stuff that we can create math for that works so that we can calculate. Does that mean we're understanding it? I don't know, maybe for some people. But I got to where I could become somewhat intuitive about it,
Mm-hmm.
but still I had to accept that fundamentally quantum mechanics is a mystery and we could deal with it, but it was inappropriate to suggest to ourselves that we knew it, that we could limit its possibilities and limit its causes and effects to something that we could encapsulate in our teachings.
It's very humbling. It makes you put your ego and your intellect a little bit at bay, you know?
Yeah, I agree. Um,
Mhm.
so later, when I found out that that was the same posture of the mystics, I realized what camp I actually belonged in. The I won't say which schools, but certain schools of, mystery schools, so-called mystery schools, they actually thought they had it all figured out and they would nail everything down. Wow, I had this sudden insight the other day. Oh, well, you must have been tapping into the Akashic records. They would have um, standardized responses that would nail down what was going on. I was
And give
just,
an impression of knowledge, give an impression of wisdom, which is basically another label for something, right?
yeah, and if you label stuff, it could potentially make you feel more comfortable about it. Um, but I find it uh, limiting.
Yeah.
So I've more or less given up trying to be the guy that tells anybody anything about the what is.
It,
My
it kills the mystery, kills the sacredness of reality too, right? When you
uh,
try to label.
yeah, I think putting a label on it does it lessens possibilities. And so
Collapse the wave.
yeah, exactly. They
Mhm,
collapse the wave and you lose the phase factor because it always cancels when you do the math.
mhm. That's very cool. So, how can we recover some of the paths that we started in this conversation? Let's say, how about you telling us a little bit about, yeah, coming back to where you met EJ and what your path with being, I don't know, interested in the things that he was,
Um, let's see.
or whatever you wanna, whatever direction you wanna go.
Well, I think we could put a few stitches in to finish where we were talking about with the uh, mysteries, we'll say.
Right.
Um, what I've been involved in recently, meaning the past several decades, is putting material out that could be used by an adventurer, a seeker, to put themselves through their effort, put themselves in a situation in which they can get a peek behind the curtain. They can get a flash of the mysteries.
Mhm.
Those books typically say nothing about what the flash means, and it gives them precious little information about what to do to deal with that. You
Those
know
were
how,
books that you wrote, Claude?
yeah,
Okay.
like Just Because Club, Any Game Cookbook.
Hmm.
Even I put a book out on mirror exercises and candle exercises. These
Hmm.
are all setting the scene and giving uh, an instruction formula that someone can use to put themselves into the awakened state and or get a flash of what typically isn't there. That's what I've been doing. EJ, to dovetail back to your question, EJ, um, through various means, he helps prepare individuals to better survive the shamanic path.
In this life or afterlife?
Well, it's both. Here is where we can exert effort, and then in the bardos we can see, what that's done for us. But here's where we have an opportunity to make those efforts.
Because you have a physical body?
Because you're incarnate, yeah.
Okay.
That does not, I'm not saying that it's not possible to take yourself to a situation in which you can also work in non-phenomenal settings. But this happens to be a good one where we can try things out and we can even change things. Sometimes you'll find yourself in the equivalent of a roller coaster. You're in the roller coaster, you're experiencing what's happening. You can even be wide awake experiencing it, but you're not driving that little cart. It's just running the tracks that were laid down. And often that is your Bardo experience. You're running on a track that's been predetermined. Here we have more of an opportunity to make efforts to change the nature of how we run on the tracks and maybe even not take certain turns. It's even possible to substitute habits.
Claude, can you define Bardo for our watchers? Bardo.
Um, no, not really. I can
Well, they can
talk
research
about it a
later.
little
They
bit.
can ask ChatGPT later.
Um, I find that one can experience the bardos in between death and rebirth. You can experience the bardos when going through a severe illness. You can experience the bardo on certain drugs. You can experience the bardos just walking around some afternoon. It's possible to become aware of that. I find that the bardos are always there. It's a question of whether or not you are seeing and experiencing the bardos, or if you're looking at um, the sim that we're in.
The CD you suggested me many years ago to listen. the AJ Gold record. It was like 40 days, how I survived after 40 days in the bar or something like that, right?
Oh, how I
And
raised myself from the dead in
yeah,
49
yeah,
days or less, and
yeah,
you
yeah.
can too, or double your money back.
Oh yeah, I didn't know the money back part.
Well, that was
Um,
part of
I
the ad
re
for it. Yeah,
Oh, really? Okay. So I remember there was a part of that CD that there was a realization that after life, the person, was in the bardo and they realized that they were always there in that place. I
that's right.
believe it's like in a place of eternity, right? And can you tell us a little bit about this place that we are always there, even if we
Um, let's
are
use let's
distracted?
use a let's start with an analogy, something else that is similar to that. People think, if they think about it, if you ask them, when you wake up in the morning, do you stop dreaming? And they'll say, well, yeah, of course, because I woke up. That's not actually the case. You continue to dream. It's like the stars. It's if it's daylight and you look up, you go, oh, yeah, that's sky. I don't see any stars. Well, where did the stars go? Oh, they go away in the daytime. No, the stars do not go away in the daytime. What happens is the brilliance of the sunlight scattered in the atmosphere occludes the stars.
I love that analogy. I love it. Yeah.
And it's actually the case that if you find yourself a long enough tube and look through that tube up into the sky, it will filter out the scattered light, and you can use that to see stars.
Really? What size the tube could be to do that?
Well, I've heard of this from reference of people that were in subterranean chambers that had holes that were drilled up, and there would be stars that would pass over that hole. And so that was meters long. I don't know how many meters, but it was
No, I
something
never
they
thought
could see.
about that. That's really interesting.
So yeah, the stars are still there and the bardos are still there, even though we're not attending to them in the same way necessarily. You can, though. You can train yourself to be more sensitive and allowing of those experiences. And
When you say the borders are still there, I make a confusion here. I have the understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the place that you have always been, although you are distracted with life and everything, is a place of self-remembering, right? Um, what is the relationship of this place of self-remembering with the bardo is always there?
I'm not sure. You go over with
No?
that linkage that you just made because I'm not too
Okay,
sure
so
about that.
so according to what I listened to from that CD, there is a place that we are always there, and I correlate that place with a sense of eternity of remembering myself, either if I'm not alive in this body anymore or if I'm here and distracted by all the phenomena. So this is like a place that is always there. Now, you just said the bardo is always there. And I have the impression the bardo is just like a transitory uh, phase of consciousness.
Well,
And yeah,
there is what is there. There is what is. How we experience that depends. So what is there is always there. However, when I refer to the bardos, that's a particular experience that I have in that place. And that's still there. Whatever that there is right here, right now.
Hmm. Hmm.
I'm just experiencing it differently in different circumstances. And if I'm experiencing it with a heavy human influenced mode, then it'll be like, oh, okay, this is California. I'll define it based on more human terms, and I'll have more human expectations of what is possible, what is not possible, what's going on. However, and here's something that you gave yourself a clue to. You're suggesting that the Bardos is related to self-awareness. Well, to me, if I was looking for a way to access that space, knowing that, oh, for me, self-awareness is a highlight of that space, I would put my efforts into developing my self-awareness because
Hmm.
it should shuttle you like a little tram. It should shuttle you straight into that space as you work with it. For others, it may be different. For some folks, it may be an overwhelming sense of oneness is a key aspect that they've identified in that space. Well, for them, I would suggest, yeah, cultivate access to that oneness. Go for the oneness, and that'll get you there. Um, but when I say get you there, it's almost can be interpreted as that is the goal.
Hmm.
And I don't make such uh, suggestions.
Hmm.
Um, I don't I don't have that kind of game plan. Um, if there is a game plan, the form of that game plan EJ gave, gosh, it's been many years ago.
Hmm.
I wrote it down on a piece of paper and put it in my wallet, and then 5 years later, I discovered it in my wallet, and I've embraced it. And that is delighted to be here, glad to be of service. What can I do to help?
Hmm.
I take that as my operating game plan. Whenever I show up, meaning I'm awake in the moment, is like, oh, yeah, I'm delighted to be here. Um, and then I set for myself a intention of, yeah, I'm glad to be of service.
Hmm.
And then there comes a part where I say, all right, what can I do to help?
Hmm.
I look, what can I do to help? I don't have an agenda. I have a formula for dealing with the present, but I don't have an agenda. Some folks have an agenda. It's like, oh, well, anytime I can, I'm going to drop the name of a certain God because that will fulfill what I'm supposed to be doing. I don't have an agenda like that. Um, I have a hope and a growing expectation that the hope is will be validated whenever I'm somewhere, that I will be shown what's on the menu for that moment, what needs to be done in that space. I mean, if you find yourself, you suddenly come to and you go, oh my God, I'm on a football team. What is this big
Hmm.
grassy area? Oh, that's the football field.
Hmm.
All right. Um, Give me the football. I'll dribble it and and sink it into the basket. No. Football doesn't, you don't dribble football and you don't shoot it into baskets. It's a different game. So it just makes total sense to me that if you have a formula of what you do, that it's going to fail. Because when you get into a space in which that formula involves things that don't even exist in that space, or they're radically different, it's bound to fail. But if you have an intention or an attitude, that attitude can serve you well in a much broader spectrum of spaces.
It's like you focus more on the principles and the intentionality than the recipe of a cake, so to speak.
Yeah. I mean, if somebody asked me, I'm going to be going into this organization, and can you give me some words of advice on how to behave? Um, the simplest is be kind.
Hmm.
Being kind will serve you well in a wide variety of situations. The nature of how to be kind will be dependent on the situation. Sometimes the kind thing to do is to listen. Sometimes the kind thing to do is step in and take action. Sometimes the kind thing to do is fill in the blank. It changes based on the situation. But kindness is more of an attitude than a prescription.
Reminds me of the golden rule.
What's that?
Reminds me of the golden rule. Do unto
I,
others, right?
yeah. No, those are there for a reason
Mhm.
because they do work. But if you get involved in marketing, then you have to start the golden rules, the silver rules, and the platinum rules. So you have rules that you can sell at a higher price. So you start having to make stuff up to have more product to sell. So
So, Claude, I want to come back to something that you said uh, about the bardo again, which is a subject that fascinates me. So, in my knowledge or impression of the bardo is, I have always seen the bardo as a transition phase from one place to the other. Would you acknowledge that, or your definition would be somewhat different?
um, that is definitely how I heard about it. In fact, the Bardos was primarily introduced to me as the transit in between death and rebirth. And you'll
That's
see
what I
it
mean.
defined that way. But if you hold that as the full and only framework, then that gives you this um, long run down a slide, an amusement park ride in which you start at one end and then you reject it at the other end. But that's not acknowledging the eternal nature of it. Now,
So for you, sorry, did I interrupt
no,
you?
no, go ahead.
For you, the bardo would be more of a sacred, mysterious place than a place of transition, like a mysterious, eternal, and sacred place.
I am going to say yes to that. And at the same time, I'm going to acknowledge that the word bardo could be in its uh, original form It could be that that is referring to a special kind of immersion into that sacred space that you're talking about. So it's very likely that I'm using the word bardo to point to not only that transition or that transit space, but also to the Crystal Palace. The
Define, please, Crystal Palace.
the Crystal Palace is one phrase that's used to speak of what's right beneath the veil. If you strip away the veil and you're left in full face-to-face immersion into what's beneath the veil.
The
I
veil of what we call reality.
Yeah, um if you take something simple like a bicycle, most of us have an experience riding a bicycle. If I look at a bicycle, it is so hard to see what is there. I see everything that's been painted over that bicycle. I see, oh, riding in a rainstorm, being blown by the wind. I see a skinned knee. I see my friend flipping over when his bicycle wheel hits a rut. I keep seeing all of that stuff. I see the whole variety of bikes that I've had. And to actually just see what is there without all of those impinged um, memories and labels, it's very difficult. But if I manage to, then I get to be with whatever is there rather than all of that collection that I'm carrying around typically. So I'm admitting that for me, the word Bartos is like back in the early 20th century, the word cancer, there were many different conditions and many different forms of cancer that were all referred to by that one word.
Mhm.
In the 19th century, what is it now? Um, consumption. Consumption was used on many death certificates to
Oh, yeah?
indicate death caused by consumption. Well, what was it? Well, it was what killed him. And it could be many different things that all presented in a similar fashion. And they had other death certificate catch-alls. The point is that,
Consumption would be related to cancer then?
oh, I don't know. I suspect not. It's
Oh,
possible.
okay.
It's possible. Um, they had to put something down.
Consumption would be something that happened with the body that made the body decay or perish.
Meant to perish, yes.
Got it. Hmm.
But was it the liver? Was it in the spleen, the pancreatus? Was it biological? Bacteria? Was it viral? They didn't even know that there's viruses and bacteria. In fact, they didn't know that there were bacteria. It was airs, bad air. So there's so many conversations we have that are fundamentally nuanced, but we don't have the words. Um, there's a urban legend from when I was a kid that said, "Oh, the Eskimos have like 25 or some large number of different words for snow.
That's not true?
Oh, it may very well be true, but I've never
Oh,
verified
okay.
it.
Oh, yeah, me neither. Yeah,
I've
I
never
heard that.
asked an Eskimo, but it
Right.
just
I
makes
never
so
met
much
one.
sense. It makes so much sense that they would have a lot of different names for the snow in different conditions. For us, it's cold stuff on the ground and that's enough. Now, if you're a skier, suddenly words like powder start slipping into the vocabulary because that becomes important, or ice, or whatever words they're using to differentiate the experience of being on it.
Same
And
thing with the Buddhism. I think the Buddhist scriptures, they have so many words for psychological states that we don't have in the West, right?
oh, I wouldn't doubt it.
Yeah, that's what I heard. Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't
Very
doubt it.
nuanced, very, very nuanced.
If there's no need for the nuanced conversation, then it will typically not come about. And sometimes it's just it has to be forgiven to be a little bit loose. But just keep in mind, as I do periodically, I'll remind myself that, oh, yeah, I'm using the word Bardos incorrectly on occasion because I'm referring to maybe the same, maybe different. It's like the word dream.
Mhm.
When some people talk about dreams, it becomes apparent as they talk about them that for them, there's only one type of dream. There's only one kind of experience they have when they're um, lying horizontal with their eyes closed, maybe going through REM. It's only one experience. And that's not what it's like for me. There's
Mhm.
many different flavors of stuff that happen when I'm in what folks would normally call dreaming.
You know,
And I just,
I have a tragic, funny story to share. One of my periods of depression that I had in the past, I was taking a specific medicine. It's called mitarzapine. So I started noticing that I was having wonderful dreams that seems to me that it lasted like for a lifetime. And they were amazing, and they were like a counterpoint to the misery of my daily life under depression. And they were like very adventurous and very colorful and very long, long. And then I look at the collateral effect, the side effects, and it was like abnormal dreams. It was like that's the way that, the big pharma labeled the experience that I was having. But fortunately, I'm out of the meds now, so no side effects. Just the dreams are not so good. I mean, so rich, but I rather be free of it. Yeah.
well, your experience when you dream is very changeable. So you could look forward to that being richer.
You mean in terms of lucid dreaming, or how could I do that?
Oh, there's various hows. There's wide amount of literature about it. Um, I think just having the interest in it and the intention, something as simple as, wow, that'd be cool. Just that degree of agreement that, yeah, if that starts happening, I'd be interested to explore what's possible during the dreaming state. That can set uh, things in motion that may lead you quite naturally there.
Those dreams I had, they were like the roller coaster that you said. They were not lucid, and I didn't have any volition. But I did have some experience with lucid dreaming, pretty much coming from the literature of Carlos Castaneda, which is a subject that I have been interested. But I'm not the kind of person that is born with the natural ability to have lucid dreams. The very few I had, they lasted a few seconds. But it's something I'm really interested in.
Well, I was talking about different forms of dreaming. I didn't suggest lucid dreaming. Um,
Oh,
lucid dreaming is typically when people talk about it, it's the outstanding characteristic of lucid dreaming is volition. I can decide to do this, I can go there, I can teleport around, I can do stuff. And I don't see that as being the prime
oh
goal.
yeah.
Um, there's certain uh, imagine a space. You're in a space. Let's say at some point you go into a meeting in which there's a company that wants to have you give them the rights to broadcast your podcasts. You're in the meeting and there's something to be done in that meeting. Isn't it advisable to stay within the character of the meeting, or would it be a good idea to start flying around or walking through walls, or
The former.
just change the dialogue? And if you're a janitor or you go somewhere and the person next door to you, they're having trouble with their toilet overflowing. You're not a plumber. You don't know anything about being a plumber, but you've had to deal sometime or another with an overflowing toilet, and you think you've got some idea of working with jiggling the handle or doing whatever, but you're going to try. So you go over there to help. Well, the minute you go into that space in order to accomplish something, you're 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 subscribing to certain sets of behavior and certain goals, certain parameters. So exercising your volition to suddenly start flying and doing other weird non native behaviors in that space, it's going to get in the way of you doing your job because you had a job to do. You took on a particular kind of work. And
Yeah. Yeah,
maybe it's
interesting
this.
that you say that because my interest in lucid dreaming is more, or have been, my original interest have been more in the sense of being aware that I'm dreaming than in doing something. But I
So,
never had time enough to exercise that awareness in the dream because the moment that I realized on the very few experiences I had, I got easily distracted by something and then no lucid dream anymore.
well, acknowledge to yourself that it's not the agency that you're looking for. It's not the uh, exercise of control that you're looking for. It's awareness that you're looking for. Start there and um, just keep working with it. Let that lead you where you need to go with it. That you're just looking for awareness in the dream.
Would you
And
say that this awareness in the dream is an equivalent of what we need to have in our daily awake life? Awake, what we call awake life.
yeah, I think it's a similar struggle.
Mhm.
Um, we can imagine that it's easier when we're awake, but I don't know if we just lower our standards or it's not so readily apparent to us. But it's a similar struggle. So what you do here will translate into the dream, and what you do in the dream will translate here.
Would you say, I believe this is true, but I just want to ask you too. Would you say you can apply the same concept to the afterlife?
One of the to answer the question, one way to answer that question is that there's the uh, current incarnation.
There is what the current.
I'm in my current incarnation. Whether I'm also in all of the other incarnations simultaneous doesn't matter. I'm experiencing this one. This is the movie theater I'm in, and I'm watching this movie. I'm in this incarnation. There's things that I can change within the carnation. However, there's also my long life, the life of the being that translates beyond the limits of a single incarnation. There are changes that can be made in your being, tendencies or habits that can be worked with that will translate beyond this one particular screening, this one particular incarnation.
Mm,
And those are the kinds of things that I'm more interested in working with.
mhm.
Um, I put myself in certain types of bottles. I'm alluding to a story that you may or may not be aware of. Back in the 50s and into the 60s, bubblegum wrappers were actually silver.
Bubblegum wrappers,
Well, actually, chewing gum. The wrapper on a
chewing
chewing
gum
gum, it
wrapper.
was paper with a thin, thin coating of silver on it.
Inside or outside?
Um,
I mean, touching the candy or
I
outside?
think it was touching the candy or
Okay.
outside. I'm not sure. I think it might have been outside. I think it was there to preserve the moisture. And then
Oh,
the wax papery part was there with I'm not sure. That's kind of a blur when I look at it in my memory. That silver could be removed and collected. And this way the story goes is a prisoner was collecting all the chewing gum wrappers in
is
his
that a
cell
true is
block.
that a true story?
Well, it's true enough. Whether whether it's
Okay. Well,
whether it's
the
historical,
meaning is true. Okay.
it's not necessarily historical, but it's true.
Yeah.
And he was collecting the silver from the wrappers and he was putting it into this old Coke bottle, you know, the smaller Coke bottles that you would get out of the machines. He'd put it in there and then he'd tap it down with a little rod or pencil. And
Wait. Coke bottle? I didn't get it. What
Coca-Cola
is it?
bottles, yeah.
Oh, Coke bottle. Yeah.
Yeah, Coca-Cola.
Glass. Yeah, Coca-Cola bottle.
The old glass bottles with their uh, curved curved bottle.
Like a
And
female shaped bottle. Yeah.
yeah, he was, tapping this down. And after 10 years, he was released on parole. And by that time, he had pretty much filled the Coke bottle. It was almost filled to the top with this silver lining that
Mhm.
was tapped down. So it was out, this solid uh, block of silver. He
Heavy.
was
Mhm.
walking out, and there was some press there and asking him how it felt to be free. He dropped the Coke bottle. It hit the ground. The glass broke away, leaving a perfectly Coke bottle shaped lump of silver. So when we keep ourselves within a certain type of container, the shape of the container, like a box, it can grow a square watermelon. So if I maintain discipline on what I do, it can have effect on that which is inhabiting this machine along with me, which is the being.
You use
The
the word discipline. Is that a reason you use this word?
Oh yeah, if you look at the square watermelon, the cube watermelon, you put it in a box, it grows in there and it gradually fills the box out and it goes into the corners and it makes it look more or less like a cube. But if one moment it's a box, the next moment it's a pyramid, another moment it's a uh, oval like an egg, if you keep changing the nature of the box, it's going to have a random smushed out fuzzy effect on the watermelon, right? It's not consistent enough.
Interesting, because I'm asking that because the word discipline has a very special meaning for me. I am the kind of person that always wants to do something new, and I have a hard time keeping a steady practice, either spiritual or
Um,
non. And so so I have a hard time with this word discipline. For me, discipline means limitation, treason,
well, it does mean
boring, you
limitations.
know
It's
what
a
I
very
mean?
good question. It's a very good
Mhm.
question. But I'm talking about discipline of a different sort.
Mm.
Um, Cooperation versus competition. Given
Okay.
an opportunity to cooperate or take that same opportunity to compete, I
Mhm.
I am naturally disciplined toward cooperation.
Amen. Yeah.
That's a kind of, I mean, running a mile every morning, that's the kind of discipline that might be of value to the HBM,
What
but
is HPM?
the human biological machine,
Oh, yeah, right.
that
Mhm.
kind of discipline may be useful to the human biological machine. However, I don't think it does a lot for the being,
Mm.
not
Mhm.
directly. Um, Compassion,
By
maintaining a
being,
steady stream of compassion, that can have a better or more likely an effect. There's going to be certain things that will translate. What precisely those are, I cannot give you a list. I don't know that I could give you a list, but if I could give you a list, I wouldn't give you a list
eh,
because that becomes a kind of box that's not the kind of box we're talking about. Um, the willingness to be of service, the the discipline to you find yourself on a nature walk and bam, all of a sudden you wake up. Having a habit to appreciate and maybe ride that awareness as long as you can is so much more useful than having a habit to instantly dive into sleep. Right? You could see where instantly diving into sleep wouldn't that be a counterproductive habit? So those are the kinds of disciplines that I would be pointing to, and refraining from violence. If somebody says something you don't like, instantly lashing out with them physically or verbally or even mentally, that's not a good habit in so many ways. So those are different kinds of discipline when people talk about. Now, is there value?
I appreciate that. It really means a lot to me about this definition of that discipline. Yeah.
It doesn't mean that there's no value in exercising will and developing your will muscle, but I don't think it matters a whole lot if you're changing what you do,
Mm.
because you have to change what you do. If you're a creative person, you love doing art, well, in one circumstance, sculpture is going to be an obvious thing to do. In another circumstance, it's going to be painting. In another circumstance, it's going to be drawing. I mean, let's face it, if you're living in a domicile in which even one splatter of paint on the carpet is instant OMG, you can't paint because paint does make it to the floor. But drawing is available. Now that's kind of a coarse example, but it points to the fact that what's available to you will change or can change, but the nature of being inclined to do art, that is something that's the same. You're just expressing it through different medium.
You
And
know, you said something really interesting when you said that running a mile every morning uh, can do a difference for the human biological machine, which is a book that E.J. Gold wrote. I love that book, right? And it doesn't change much the being. I would like you to ask you to define being. Is that what we call soul or spirit, or what is it?
yeah, we have a lot of different words, and I'm not I'm not capable to do a compare and difference between there's essential self, there's being, there's soul, there's spirit.
So you differentiate all four?
No, I use them whenever it seems appropriate, and
Okay.
I change the word I use based on who I think I'm talking to. Like what
Mhm.
word will point them in the direction. The vision I have of what's going on there is very different than I've heard anybody talk about. And
Oh,
it
what is it?
has more to do with a crossover between quantum computers and astronomy.
I love it. Well, let's dig into that. I love it. Yeah.
So, but yeah, basically the the not physical part, the part that is capable of journeying through many incarnations rather than just a single incarnation. And either you have a notion that there is an aspect of you that transcends or is not limited by this one single incarnation, or you don't. And that to me is the big delimiter. It's like if you think
Big,
there's something
big, big
that
what?
goes
Big what?
delimiter,
What
it's
is
the
that?
it's the precipitous notion. It will
Mhm.
precipitate something when you take on the notion that, oh yeah, there's an aspect of me that is not limited by this incarnation. As soon as
Wh-
you suggest that to yourself, then that opens up many doors.
When you say other incarnations, would you also include other parallel universes too?
Oh yeah,
Oh yeah,
anywhere other than here,
got it.
any other here. If I accept that there's this something or other that can be in any other vessel than this vessel, then that's enough. I don't have to define it any more uh,
I love it. Yeah.
limiting than that. But that is an important one. If there's nothing that escapes this life, then that presents a very different situation.
That's what the materialistic people believe, right? The materialist people, that there's nothing else than what's here.
Well, I don't know. I don't know what they believe.
Okay.
I know what some folks say, and I know
I
that people have different frameworks, and I don't know if the framework they have is the framework they communicate about. Um, Part of why I say that is that there's this whole discussion about is there a God?
Mm-hmm.
And in a certain respect, the answer to that is absolutely no, based on when anybody says God, they have a picture, they have a definition, they have a paragraph out of a book. And is that what is there? No. Is there something there? Ah, no, that's a different question. Yes, there can be something there. And is there something, when I use the word God and I'm pointing to something, is there something there? Yes. But your pointer toward that, what you're calling God, is just a pointer toward that. It's not a limiting uh, cloak that fully defines and reveals the full nature of whatever that something is that you're pointing to. Now, if somebody says, do I believe in God? Well, I could say yes, but I know if I fully defined what I'm pointing toward when I say yes, they'll be like, no, dude, I was talking about God.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And, but if you point in a particular direction, you have to point using something. You can point using your finger, you can point using an arrow, you can point using a compass. You're using something to point. And to me, that is a framework. And I choose to, whenever possible, use a framework that makes it easier to point to where I want to point. And I will change my frameworks as necessary with the full realization that, um, yeah, that's just a framework that's working at the moment. And if I'm pressed on the issue, I'll have to admit that no, it's not a perfect fit.
Coming
So,
back to my question, um, this is just a curiosity. Why did you use the word being in this conversation?
oh, being,
Yeah, when you said when you run a mile, it makes a difference for the human biological machine, but doesn't make much difference to the bee. Why did you use
If I
that?
said it that way, then that's not how I would have chosen to say it. It would have been, I would suggest that having the discipline to run a mile every morning is something that to me has obvious benefit for the human biological machine,
I
but
agree.
it doesn't necessarily have value for the being.
Yeah, I think that's what you did. My words were wrong. I'm sorry. I think you said doesn't necessarily. Yeah.
And that's just because I don't see, I mean, it does exercise well. So, and having discipline and being able to stay the course. I mean, we spend part of our life trying to figure out, well, what do I feel comfortable with as the course of my life?
Hmm.
If you find that, but you have no ability to stay the course, then you have something to work on. Because if you know what you want the course of your life to be, and you don't have the ability to stay that course, you're not going to get very far.
And that's when it
However,
comes the delight that you said in the beginning of the conversation, to be delighted about where you are, like the piece of paper that you wrote from EJ.
well, yeah, that is, for me, that's a prescription of what I'd like to reinforce as my approach when I come to in a situation. I don't want to be a grumpy Gus. I want to be delighted. I want to voluntarize being delighted. Yeah, I'm delighted to be here. If you don't have that attitude, when you do get an awakening moment, you become aware of yourself, having the habit of being delighted that suddenly you're actually aware of yourself. That's a good habit. Now, doesn't mean that you can't notice that there's some real issues. Um, being in Auschwitz, that wasn't, all cherries, cherries. But that doesn't mean that you should nurture the habit of being disgruntled anytime you found yourself awake. You should embrace that as a moment in which you're closer to God.
That's what saved Viktor Frankl, for example, right? The attitude.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So being delighted whenever you find yourself aware and awake, I think that's a good habit. So that is something I aspire to reinforcing. And then acknowledging and reinforcing being glad to be of service. That I think is a good thing
Oh
because
yeah.
I'm I'm following a bodhisattva path. Where on the path am I? Well, that's up for debate. I'm at the beginning, middle, end, somewhere. I'm aspiring on that path. So reinforcing the notion of being glad to be of service. Well, oh man,
Mhm.
if I'm not glad to be of service, this is the wrong path to be on, I'll tell you that. So being glad, yeah, I want to be glad to be of service. I want to hone that as an attitude. I want to voluntarize the attitude of being glad. And then what can I do to help? To me, that's a question that is reaffirming, reinforcing this like searchlight where, oh, okay, let's look about. Let's find out what can I do to help. So it puts me in an active state where
Mhm,
I'm moving in this space, figuratively speaking, looking to find what can I do to help.
mhm.
Sometimes the table needs setting. Sometimes you've got to sweep the floors or clean the toilets, or you have to ladle out the food, or you get the little paper bowls and plates and get them set up at the beginning of the lunch line. There's different roles in the space.
There's
And some,
always an opportunity to help somebody, right?
yeah, there typically is. Um, but I'm actually asking the space, not individuals.
Hmm. The
Uh,
situation.
yeah, because it's it's a it's hard to unpack when we are of service, because being of service typically involves people and being helpful and of service to people. But if you focus it on people, that takes you down one path. Not a bad path, but it's not the path that I'm looking at. Um, Aspiring to be of service to the work means that we also need to keep a clear focus toward something much higher than human beings.
Mhm.
And there's various ways to do that. You can start by just being more inclusive, being of service to the planet, being of service, just add, be inclusive. Um,
If we
but
use that word that is so have such a heavy meaning, like be at service to God, so to speak, right?
did I say God or absolute?
No, no, I'm saying that. I'm saying like if you said be at service to something higher, and then I suggest be at service to God, although this word has many different meanings for many different beliefs and religions.
Yeah, I know. It's a Back in the 60s we talked about baggage. That was part of the
Mhm.
psychological uh space. And being of service to God is a phrase that if you tell people, oh, yes, go forth and be of service to God, they've got a lot of baggage on what that means. They'll know exactly what that means. It might mean going on a crusade and killing folks that don't believe in God the way you do or the God you believe in. It might mean proselytizing. It might mean doing good works, or it might be having a jihad. I mean, there's all kinds of different baggage that people have about that. And I don't presume that I know what that phrase will unpack into.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um,
It can be
I,
a good thing for some people, it can be a negative thing for others too.
yeah.
Mhm. Coming back to what you said, what's the name of the when the person is addicted to pleasure? What I forgot the word is missing me.
I'm
Uh,
addicted to pleasure.
yeah, like it's all about having pleasure. What's the word again? Uh, anyway, uh,
Yeah.
the the principles that you said that you draw that you base on your life, I think they integrate two different things. One is the feeling of joy, which is pleasure, but it's not only that, but it's also a sense of service. Some people, they, some people, I mean, everybody, right, in some way, they tend to distract to either one direction, either to seeking for pleasure. It's something like ism. The word ends with ism. Uh, So either seeking only joy or pleasure, or seeing everything as a chore, as a sacrifice, something like heavy, or I have to do this service or be at service, but you kind of integrate both in one thing. I like that.
Well, it's an interesting point you bring up because the word joy and how it is interpreted highlights a um, roadblock on the path. And let me explain what I mean by that. Um, there's joy and then there's joy, and they unfortunately have the same word.
Mhm.
One form of joy is more biological, and there's another form of joy which is not biological, it's more spiritual. However, they can be sort of the same. So if spiritual joy is rising, presenting itself to you, and you have a habit of interpreting, quote, joy or anything that looks like the joy that you're thinking of, if you interpret that as a biological function, then you'll find yourself derailing or detouring that spiritual joy and expressing it in biological terms. Thereby, you prevent yourself from allowing it to fruit, to unfold to its higher possibilities. Same thing happens with oneness. If you interpret oneness as, oh, do you want to hook up? That when you start getting this feeling of oneness, you instantly detour that into a biological response, then that becomes a barrier because it gets short-circuited. So that can prevent you from hitting the higher levels of oneness. And the same with love. If you have an issue with short-circuiting rising spiritual love into biological events, then again, you're going to prevent yourself from going down the path that a spiritual love could take you. So pleasure seeking is not bad in itself, but it can, depending on what happens, it can put you in a situation where you keep short-circuiting spiritual arisings into biology,
That
which
makes so
is
much sense. Yeah.
unfortunate.
Hmm. And that's where
So,
the current gravity center of our culture, entertainment culture, especially in the West, is at the moment, right?
yeah, it seems like it, but boy, is there so much going on.
Yeah.
There's
I mean,
so
yeah,
much
I
happening.
agree. I agree. Yeah. If you have eyes to see, you see both the spiritual and the non-spiritual manifesting, in everything, including entertainment,
Yeah, there's a lot.
culture. Too much sometimes, I think. Or at least, I perceive. It's a very interesting times we are now.
Yeah, isn't that a
So,
Chinese curse?
sorry, what?
When I was a kid, they would talk about may you live in interesting times as
Oh
a
yeah.
Chinese curse. Because when we say
Uh,
interesting, typically there's more war on the rise. I mean, how many
oh,
apocalypses do we have that are on the horizon?
mhm.
It's
Yeah, that makes the
there's a lot
times
going
even more
on.
interesting. Yeah. It's
But
funny that I have been listening a lot about quantum physics, coming back now to the quantum.
mhm.
No, the Oppenheimer movie getting all the Oscars, and I was at South by Southwest, which is a you know, South by Southwest, the
Yeah,
event
yeah.
here in Austin. Yeah. There was pretty much 90% of it was in artificial intelligence, in all kinds of levels you can imagine. But there was some discussions already about quantum computing. And I believe that this is going to be more and more into the, the main discussion there. As AI a few years ago was not the main, and now is the main, and quantum is kind of appearing. Quantum computing is going to come. So how do you see this whole revival of the quantum discussion, especially in terms of technology at the moment?
Um, I'm not sure.
No?
I've done some reading on quantum computing and how it's done. A little bit of the reading that I've been involved in suggests that if you're thinking of a quantum computer the way you think of a regular computer, you might be disappointed
Hmm.
because it looks like quantum computers are much better at handling certain kinds of problems than others. So it's possible that quantum computing may end up at some point being a add-on module. Like originally graphics were handled through the CPU, the old IBMs, all the graphics were done on the CPU. But then eventually we had graphics cards, which were separate, had their own RAM, their own processing chips. And it's possible that computers will end up having a quantum card, which will
Yeah,
handle certain parts of it.
yeah. I, as far as I understand, and I'm not an expert on it, it seems what some of the lectures were saying, quantum computing is going to be on the cloud and everybody can access that to any computer. The power of the quantum computer is not going to be local. It's going to be accessible in the cloud. That's what they are talking about.
I guess. I mean, which apocalypse is going to hit before that comes? Because that's certainly going to lend itself. I mean, I lurk. I watch only certain email uh, forums that monitor hackers. Every day, every day there's a new hack. Every day they find one more thing wrong with one of the operating systems. And by wrong, I mean a vulnerability. So they're finding vulnerabilities constantly. So yeah, let's put an infinitely powerful quantum computer in the cloud. And of course, there won't be anyone clever enough to hack into that and use it for nefarious purposes. I mean,
Anything with AI, right? Yeah.
that's people that have not been paying attention. As far as I can tell, almost everything is hackable. The fact that it hasn't been hacked is because there hasn't been a sufficient uh, force applied to that particular loci.
You talk about hackable in terms of physical and virtual, right?
Virtual, physical, many of the hacks that happen that we see in the news, many of those are social engineering. They Somebody finds out that someone working at the Defense Department is a wannabe writer. So they make up an email that says, we read your blah, blah story on blah, blah forum. We thought that was very promising premise for a book. We would like to give you an advance of X dollars. It's not much money, but we'll give you an advance to turn that into a novel. Please read the contract and get back to us at your soonest. And of course, the contract is a virus. That's social
Mm,
engineering. Now
hmm.
the IT guy says absolutely never open uh, anything that's been sent by email.
Including PDFs and everything, right?
Everything. Don't open it. Oh, but this is their chance to write a novel. And they click on it. People do that kind of silliness.
Oh
Even
yeah.
even at NSA, they'll do that,
Mhm. You
even though
know,
they know they shouldn't.
something happened with me a few days ago that I'm still thinking. You know, the speed test, there's a website. I don't know what's the name. It's related to speed test to see how speedy your
Yeah,
internet.
yeah.
So I just put speed test there, and I didn't click on the right link in Google, but I just put on the browser, and I got into a site that is like a scam. So when I got into that, my computer start flashing. You got a virus. You got a virus. Scanning your computer. You got five different very bad virus.
Yeah, yeah.
And there was like, huh. And that was McAfee, something like McAfee is running, whatever. Anyway, I went to my Windows that has a security scan, and the security scan said my computer was fine. I don't even know if my computer is fine or not, which one to believe. But I was like, huh, that whole thing was for me to buy that product, saying that I had a virus that I might not have. That was my experience.
That was in your browser only, just so
Mm,
you know. That was a browser page that was flashing. It wasn't your computer that was flashing. It was a browser
that
page.
that's what
You,
I
you went to a
realized.
page
Yeah.
and they were sending HTML to you, and the HTML was making stuff happen. The next um, point of entry would be for you to click something or to call a phone number.
Which I did, and then I saw the price. I said, I'm not going to pay for that.
Oh God, I'm glad that you didn't go very far because you don't want to. You don't have McAfee on your computer. You're using, from the sounds of it, Windows
Yeah, that's one of the things that I was aware. I said, I don't remember installing McAfee in my computer. So this is something that is happening not locally. That's kind of a browser thing.
Yeah, but there's a lot of people that have McAfee on their computers. So anybody with McAfee would go, oh, my McAfee is telling me I have a virus. So, and oh, how generous of them to put a phone number up for me to call. And how generous for them to help me over the phone, and how generous of them to take control of my computer. All I have to do is download this program from friendly.friendly. And yeah, all of a sudden you have your computer hacked, your banking hacked.
Crazy, yeah. I
It's
got I got another day. I know this is a little tangent, but I think it's just important because many people might fall, especially older people. I mean, I'm from a generation of computers, and even I see myself falling sometime. I was having a problem with my computer. I went to Google and I put Best Buy Geek Squad. So I got into a site that was an ad that was not Best Buy itself, but they impersonating Geek Squad. So I called them, and I had a I had already a membership with Geek Squad. And by the way, Geek Squad, the Best Buy, I'm not buying if you do this advertisement. So I had a membership with Geek Squad. And I called that number, say, hey, I have a membership. I want to schedule an appointment for you to see my computer. And the guy impersonated as if he was a Best Buy, and he asked my phone number and everything, and he confirmed. Anyway, it was a guy from India impersonating Best Buy. And that's a big scam going on. I think Google needs to be careful in letting these people make ads, because those are the first entries on the search. And
Why would
after
Google
that,
be careful? They make money off those ads.
yeah, but I mean, yeah,
Money
I
is more
understand.
important to them. Money is more
I agree.
important to them than your safety or your security.
Yeah, I mean, Google needed to be more careful towards people and not profits, in other words.
Well,
Because
you're
those
hitting
are the very
upon
first entries, you know.
greed. Greed is behind a lot of what's wrong.
Mhm.
Nutrition, the greed of cereal companies started the generations of adolescent diabetes that we have now. Because, I mean, they started making cereals and the cereals were pretty nice, but then all of a sudden they discovered, lo and behold, that if they coated everything with more and more layers of sugar, that they would sell more and the kids would demand to have it. And I mean, that was all greed.
The original cereal might have even been healthy, right? The original concept.
Yeah, the original, but not the levels of sugar. The original cereal,
And it
Ruskits was
might be
one of the
even not
original cereals.
a non-GMO corn at that time, because now everything is GMO too. Um, yeah, this is a big rabbit hole we can go. I just want to talk now about this side that you and EJ have about bringing technology to enhance enhance the spirituality and self-awareness in people, especially through the video games. Can you talk something about that? How do you bring
Well,
technology to spirituality?
if we accept for a moment that there is such a thing as incarnation, and if you look at, let's say the apparent Earth history, going back for
Parent.
10,000 years, we don't know what happened earlier than 10,000. It looks like there were advanced civilizations that have undergone some problems. But if we look back for 10,000 years, this is a pretty special, or was a pretty special, starting in 90s. It was a special era. We had relative freedom, relative religious freedom, which may disappear in the United States very quickly.
I was pre 9/11, right?
Um,
The
well,
90s, yeah.
90s going back, no, we still had religious freedom, more or less. You could
I
still
know,
get
but
beat up if you're on the wrong
I'm
street
saying in
corner.
terms of like the freedom that we had in the 90s got very different after 9/11.
Yes and no. There were a lot of problems with 9/11. Nonprofits suddenly lost their support base. Um,
Oh yeah, I didn't know that.
right after 9/11, it became shameful if you donated to anything other than first responders and basically the socially approved charities. For about a decade, museums lost support. Many other nonprofits ended up folding because it's just, why would you put your money there when it should go to this more, patriotic thing? And it was just a disruption. It disrupted the art market tremendously, for similar reasons. It had a profound impact on the culture. We still had freedoms, and we even now have quite a few freedoms. But in the 90s, up into the 2000s, not only did you have freedoms, but the mechanisms for putting out technology were still within the realm of possibility. We have a four-person gaming company. That is
Mm-hmm.
pretty rare.
Mm-hmm.
We started with four people and we kept the same four people, but now most gaming companies have either thousands or many dozens of participants.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're working with the new engines, the new rendering systems, it is so complex. There's so much going on that it's impossible to create a game with just 4 people, which means it's gone corporate.
Oh yeah.
And corporations have shareholders, and shareholders have to be satisfied that you're making money for them. And the
The
CEOs of
greed
these
also,
companies,
the greed again in the picture, the greed.
yeah, the greed has it's advanced to the place where it's hard to be in between the cracks.
Hmm.
Once upon a time, there were huge dinosaurs that dominated the landscape, and little tiny furry creatures that would run around totally free in the underbrush. All they had to watch out for was being stepped on, but they weren't even noticeable to the dinosaurs. They were too small for the Tyrannosaurus Rex, and they were too little, and they weren't on the treetops for the Brontosaurus. So they were insignificant. So that gave them freedom. And at a certain point, we were small enough that we were insignificant. So we didn't have to worry about anybody limiting what we could do because we were a threat to no one.
Hmm.
And at that time, the technology was available to do what we wanted to do without having the need for 1,000 or 2,000 people helping.
And the main goal was not to make money too, right?
For us, no,
Or
not at all. We've
yeah.
all of our games have been, uh, I mean, loss leader doesn't even apply. It's we just there's no
What is,
follow-up.
what
We
is
just
loss
do
leader? What
these
is
loss
loss leader?
leader.
That's a
A
game,
loss
one of the
leader is
games.
where you put a little toaster on sale in your appliance store. So you have this little toaster that turns out when you get there, the toaster only has one slot and everybody wants 2 slots. So people come in to get this super cheap toaster, but when they get there, they find out it's not going to be satisfying and they look around to buy something else, and everything else is priced to make money. The toaster was a loss leader. Anybody that bought it, they
Loss
lost
leaders.
money.
Hmm.
But it was a leader in the fishing sense, where you cast your line to bring in the customers,
Hmm.
which is it's a marketing ploy. But no, we just straight up were doing this because it was a way of reaching people. Right now on YouTube, quantum magic videos. Oh,
Quantum Magic. Quantum.
quantum magic videos.
That's a
We have
channel.
That's a channel. Yeah, that's the channel name. It's all one word, quantum magic videos on YouTube. There's two M's, quantum and then magic videos. And those are inductions, they are experiences that deal with many different topics. Um, some deal with in a positive way with addiction, some deal with other situations that people find themselves in. Some are looking
Nice.
to give or receive blessings. So we have the blessing orb. There's many different videos that are available there for people to use. We also
And
have
those
the
are those are videos that people watch passively without interacting like a video game.
no,
No?
they do not interact the way you do in a video game, but we encourage them to interact with the video. One way to do that is by exerting force to be present and follow.
Mm.
Another way of interacting is to acknowledge.
Mm.
Like in the video, it may say, you've received a certain amount of happiness.
Hmm.
And you can nod your head, or you can just
That's
say,
cool.
yeah, or I've received a certain amount of happiness. It's a contributing, basically. You follow and contribute. So
Interesting.
there is an active aspect to it. But there's some folks that aren't able to do that because they don't have that facility. So for them, they watch um, doing whatever it is that they are able to do.
Hmm.
Those are recordings of the orbs that are available on EarthGame, URTHGAME.com.
What is an orb?
An orb is a level, but
Mm.
it's like a game level, but we call them orbs for various reasons. Not the least of
Such as
which is
such
the
as
what's that?
for very reasons such as
Such as, well, the extension was ORB. We wanted to use an
um,
extension that wasn't claimed by anything else, and
mhm,
still no one has claimed that as a graphics format or any kind of format. So that was good.
mhm,
Um, Also, orb it suggests a sphere,
mhm.
and
Like
one
an
of the
aura, right? Like a or
yeah, but there's a certain framework or perception that you can use where you walk around. This is a meditation where you walk around assuming the posture that you're inside a 10-foot diameter sphere, and everything you see is projected onto that sphere.
like
And
10 feet, 10 feet.
yeah, 10-foot radius. Yeah.
Interesting. That reminds me the idea that Don Castaneda's Don Juan said that we are like an orb of energy on the extension of our open arms, that the seers could see us as a bubble of energy. I just had this association
Well,
here.
there is that too. Um, they've actually can measure the electric field of the heart now.
Mm,
And it also is about 10 foot. So
mm,
there's synchronicity there. But anyway, it amused us to call them orbs. Then we had to call them something.
mhm.
And if there's
You know,
things that
Claude,
you can really,
sorry. There is my phone. Unfortunately, I didn't turn that off. And it's just, I have to find where it is here. I'm sorry. Oh, it's here. I'm gonna put that in airplane mode so it doesn't bother me anymore. So we're
it
talking about orbs.
just so you know, I couldn't hear it going off.
Oh no? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it started to bother me here.
So anyway, on Earth Game, we have the games, but those games rely on the Windows operating system.
Mhm.
It's
No Apple, no Apple.
no Apple. And more that's becoming a limitation.
Yeah.
And it's possible that one of these days, overnight, Microsoft can make it so that none of our games run
Mm.
on their operating system. They wouldn't do it deliberately, but it could be a side uh,
Hmm.
effect. I mean, I had a version of Photoshop from the late 90s, and I had that up until a few years ago when overnight Windows changed something in the operating system and my Photoshop no longer works.
Wow. Yeah,
So
they're transitioning to the subscription model, right?
they are, but
Mm.
my Photoshop was independent of Adobe
And
because
you
it was a
bought
standard,
that.
it was a
Yeah, it's like a
standalone,
DVD, right?
yeah, it was a DVD. So I had that for quite some time. But Windows changed. So that was alarming.
Hmm?
But we've already had other reasons to be alarmed in the past. So we wanted to record the orbs while Windows was still running them so that we had them on video, because video MP4 we foresee being around for quite some time.
So,
It's
Claude, the orbs are video recordings of video game scenes.
no, the quantum magic videos are recordings of the video game orbs.
Oh, they are. Okay. So they are experiences in the video game that were recorded. Okay, got it.
Right.
Got it.
Um, Typically, they were recordings of EJ running the orb.
And
He,
speaking too, in audio too.
that's already been built into the game.
Oh, okay.
It's just he was running the mouse and the keyboard when it was recorded for the quantum magic video channel.
And why did you use video game as a channel to promote a message or a teaching that you guys wanted to?
We were not using it to promote a message.
No?
No, we were using it as a way of spreading blessings. We were using it as a vehicle for karma relief. We were using
So
it as
more like an experience, as
yeah,
an
it was more like an
experience.
experience. And going through that experience would, in some cases, stimulate or trigger one's, in fact, interest in the bardos. In some cases, it would be a direct karma cleanse, which would relieve that for people. And it was
Love that.
also, they were by issue. There's many different orbs, and they address different aspects of people's situation. So
You
they're
have orbs
not
for
something we were doing
addiction,
to spread the word,
right?
good, bad, or otherwise. We weren't trying to do that. We weren't using it to create members to an organization. And there was nothing that we specifically wanted to bring about as a change in anyone else's life. These were, if you were interested in karma cleanse, if you were interested in dealing with, well, depression or anything of the sort, these might be a remedy for you. We
Such
don't,
as like addiction, PTSD, something like
yeah,
that.
we never
Yeah.
put any out called PTSD, but we have an addiction. Um, PTSD is something that um, it's a you want to be careful with, because there's some folks that are in such heavy need for proper handling of that um, that's an
Okay.
area that it behooves one to be gentle.
It's
And
very
yes,
complex.
we have
It's like what you said about the word cancer in the past. PTSD can be many things, right? It's like an umbrella term for many things.
well, it's a form of respect.
Right. Okay.
And it turns out we had a very dear friend of the school who was working in the school until he passed. Um, he had PTSD from Vietnam, and
So that was
his,
a friend? I didn't get it. That
a
was a friend
friend,
of
yeah,
yours?
a friend, working partner, buddy,
Mm.
and he had a lot of relief from the orbs, but it wasn't enough in itself. There were other remedies that were necessary for him, but he definitely appreciated the value that the orbs brought to his situation.
But some relief, but not a cure.
I don't know if there's a cure, but
Mhm.
yeah. one could
or
hope
a
that there's a cure.
or a permanent release or something.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, we can but hope.
Mhm.
There's things that present themselves as being very beneficial, and those are on the horizon of being
I
released.
heard some service dogs can specifically help PTSD, people with PTSD. That was pretty interesting. Like the dog can kind of smell when
Yeah, yeah,
a
yeah.
trauma being it's pretty
They
interesting.
can smell it coming on, and then they can act as
Yeah.
a partial solution to that. You know, an alert and as well as a solution.
And I heard some dogs can just by touching you can kind of relieve the PTSD symptoms, the trauma symptoms. And sometimes they jump into your chest, and it's pretty interesting. It's such a mystery.
Well, human beings are human beings, and um, touch. Touch has been important throughout the history of people. And so it doesn't surprise me that touch from the dogs has a benefit.
Yeah, the skin is our larger organ, right? They say it's the larger organ we have is the skin.
Yeah.
Anyway, so you're talking about the video games, right? And that they were built to create some experience for karma relief and everything. How come I know AJ Gold started with this idea of video game when he was kind of like after like a hospital experience, like I was in bed for a long time, right?
That was when he experienced and realized the uh, possibilities in video games.
And that was like late 80s or early 90s. When was that? Or
Um, well, it started in the late 80s. We used actually the first Zelda game. It wasn't
mm.
called Zelda 1, but it was the Zelda before Zelda 2. Old 8-bit Nintendo. We
Wow.
used that and found it to be a very powerful teaching tool. It gave people a hands-on experience, hands-on controller, but a hands-on experience that highlighted many uh, teachings about the word. So that was a pleasant revelation to see that that experience could be created in a video game, which means that you could go through it on your own wherever you are. You didn't have to go to some special temple somewhere to be put into a contrived situation that would give you an opportunity for those lessons. You could do it with the video game. That's nice.
So yeah, so I'm thinking about I'm putting myself on the feet of the people who are watching us now. Could you please define work? You just use the word work. You can do the work using video games. What do you mean by work?
Um, let's say not the work. Let's just say work. What do you mean by the word
Okay,
work?
by the word work. Yeah. Is that work with a capital W,
No,
would you
let's not even
say?
worry about whether it's capital or not.
Okay.
We won't worry about the font either. Um, there is a capital W work. Precisely what that means, yeah, I can't speak to that. But let's just talk about work in general. The perspective I have is that everyone on this planet that has come here incarnated, they do it with some intentions.
Before they were born?
They had a plan. They had
Really?
a plan. Now, what that plan is depends on the person. There's a lot of plans that overlap, but they had a plan. Like, oh, okay, this lifetime, oh man, I really need to work on that habit. That's not working out for me. I got to change that habit. And oh yeah, I want to be sure to do this other thing. And that's about it. Anything else that comes along that seems like a good idea, I'll deal with it. But these are the two things I want to accomplish. So that was the plan. For that individual, working on that habit and changing something or doing something that they came to do, that is their work. That's their work.
Would you say that, bringing astrology to that, would you say based on that decision, the place and the time period the person was born has to do with this plan? The
No,
astrological sign?
Huber Bluber Highway.
What do you mean by that?
That's a cartoon. It's an animation, Huber Bluber Highway. And it
Um,
shows a animation of this baby being born. And before they're born, they check out the lifetimes. They scan them. They say, oh, what about this one? Nah. Oh, that one looks like a good lifetime. And they pick one and they jump in. Now,
that was in the cartoon?
yeah, it's in the cartoon,
Interesting.
which gives you not a bad overall impression of what the process really is. You
Very
can,
deep and different the cartoons we see nowadays, huh?
well, that's like a 30 or 40-year-old cartoon.
Mhm.
Now, the thing is, when you're in the bardos, sometimes you run screaming out of the bardos into the nearest incarnation you can find. That's not very well planned.
That would be the
Sometimes,
the case with most people, or no?
I, yeah, we could say that, or we could just leave it to itself. It doesn't help to say that, because it doesn't help to pronounce judgment, because
So
you
you
don't know
just
who
want to
you're
get
talking.
out of that intense experience you're having, and then you just, okay, get me out of here and
Oh,
give
they don't
me
even say get me out of here. It's just like they dive. They're diving in the nearest rabbit hole.
right. Okay.
So that's a thing that can happen. But
Mhm.
then there's also the possibility of a more thoughtful, even though you're not using your brain, it could be a more thoughtful picking. And you can base that on what you need, either what you need to do as service or what you need to prepare yourself for the next part of your journey. Well, if you've done that, then you have work to do. I
What do you
suppose
mean if you done? Oh, if you make this decision, then you have work to do.
that's right. If you've made a decision that there's something you need to do or want to do, something that you've set as an agenda item, put on your honeydew list, well, then that is there. But when you get here, all of a sudden you're in an environment that might be messing with your ability to do what you need to do.
Or
And
even
some,
to remember the original plan, right? Because amnesia comes in for most people, right?
yeah, well, the ability to state to yourself what you're here to do, I'm not sure when that kicks in. I'm not sure how many people I could ask that question and they would give me a simple answer. I think they have a notion that you can call it an operating or functional notion of what it is, But
Mhm.
to put it into words, I don't know that there's many people that could do that
And when you
without
said in the
speaking to this.
beginning,
What's that?
you said in the beginning of our conversation that EJ Gold came to this lifetime fully realized. That means he remembered everything he was
Yeah, yeah.
set here to do. Okay.
But
Yeah, that complements that.
that's rare. There's
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, we'll be generous and say that there's 100 or 200
Would
on the planet that are like that.
would
There's
the
some
Dalai
still on here.
Lamas would the Dalai Lamas be one of those examples?
Um, that's very likely. That's very likely.
Hmm.
Um, one of the things that happens is that you can come in and then you sleep for a while, or you get by circumstance pounded into disavowing some of your spiritual experience. Your parents at a certain point might be saying, look, that stuffed animal is just a toy. But no, it's real. It's that's my friend. We talk and have conversations. And no, no, that's just a stuffed toy. It's time you realize that. And they will, in some cases, beat it out of you.
Is
The
that why EJ has so many stuffed animals at his house? I just remember it.
he does have a lot of stuffed
He
animals,
does, right? Yeah, in his studio
but
there, in the
yeah, he
musical
he
studio.
definitely does not look at them as cloth
Just
and
stuff.
fabric and um, cotton wadding. No, I'm
Mhm.
just using that as example.
Yeah,
Some
right,
people,
right.
the floating blue lights that are always with them and watching out for them, they're taught that that is not real and it's suppressed. And so for many of us, we have a period where our spiritual natures are suppressed. Or, I mean, there's people that say, oh, no, I don't suppress the spiritual nature of my children. In fact, I help them to actualize their spiritual nature. And how is their spiritual nature actualized? By giving them a bunch of belief systems that form a box so that they can be living in a oppressive spiritual box instead of the freedom to experience whatever their spiritual nature is without the words and definitions of parents and authority figures.
Claude, when you say that, you mentioned something like sometimes the person comes with a mission, so to speak, a plan, and then life circumstances happen to make that difficult. Would you say that person also has some power, in quote, to choose the life circumstances they would be, including their parents and the place of birth or something like that?
Well, yeah, you choose, but you choose based on it's not based on lack of pain or lack of challenge. It's based on opportunity.
On what you need. Hmm.
And so it's not atypical for people to basically go through a period of socialization and then go through a period of removing the more detrimental influence of that socialization. And then they have another period where they try to come to some vision of what their work was and some vision of who they are as a being. And then maybe they have to develop skills that let them accomplish what they're here to do. And then there's remedial trying to fix um, the damage that was done earlier in life. And then later, after you've gone through that,
what they call unlearning, right? Sometimes unlearning.
yeah, you have to unlearn certain things. Then you
Mhm,
have to learn tricks to get around some of the damage that is in there,
mhm.
walking wounded. You do the best you can, and then you do your work. And that's the nature of it. And there's many folks that are on their spiritual path and they're limping. But turns out they can do what they need to do with a limp. So they do that. And in situations where you're working with others, often others can supplement uh, skills or help that you don't happen to have yourself. So communities can work in ways that maybe the individuals couldn't.
What they
But
call the
it's a process.
sangha, the concept of sangha
Oh yeah,
for
the
community.
Sangha.
Yeah, right.
Mhm. And the Sangha is there whether you are in a community or not. The Sangha is a
Mm-hmm.
definition of fellow travelers on the spiritual path.
Mm-hmm. Which is everybody in a sense, conscious or not. Everybody's in the same journey.
Yeah, sort of, no.
So
It
when you
depends on their
said
preoccupation. If um, if you've ever tried to have a quiet dinner with a dog that has been allowed to beg for food at the table,
I
that
can totally
incessant
relate
begging,
to that.
yeah, it distracts. And if you're in the company of people that are rather involved in the human pursuits, then that can be very distracting. It can be a problem. Um, in coarse terms, if you have a somebody that's stalking you for some kind of physical relationship, and that's all they've got in their head, well, that's going to be distracting if you're looking for more than just a physical relationship. So, are they part of your Sangha? I don't know. They might be part of the challenge
Mm-hmm.
rather than the Sangha. Could they potentially be? Well, yeah, as you say, everyone is potentially part of a Sangha. That doesn't mean that it's happening right now.
I just want to bring something that you said before that caught my attention. You said some people have the privilege, maybe earned or not, to in the bardo choose how it's going to be their next existence based on a plan. But many people, maybe most or not, don't have that opportunity, and they just jump and dive in the first opportunity they have to incarnate themselves. So those people that don't have that opportunity, those are the people that are not going to be aware of some kind of higher work to do in this existence.
Oh no, not necessarily. I would
No?
I wouldn't make that as a proclamation.
Yeah,
Um,
I
but I
for some reason I
just
make this association.
as an aside, I wanted to point out that the Labyrinth Readers Society that we've been working with for 50 years at this point,
50? 50?
50, yeah.
Wow, that's a long
I
time.
think it's hard, let's see, doing the math started in 74.
Wow.
So 74, 84, 94,
I was
2004,
4 years old.
2014. Yeah, 50 years ago.
Wow.
So for 50 years, and what the Labyrinth Reader Society does is it reads from a particular sacred text, the American Book of the Dead, which are instructions on how to navigate the bardos. We deliver those readings to those in the bardos, like a little coach, like a corner coach at a boxing, jab, jab, you know, just giving the instructions as they're going through the Bardos to help
The
the
bardos in that case will be the person who just died.
say again.
The use of bardos in this situation is the person who just died using
Typically,
that. Yeah, okay.
typically. However, um, there was someone that was going through a particular form of therapy that requested we do readings for them, and we did. There was someone that was in an intense illness,
Mhm.
and that was putting them straight into the Bardos, and we did readings for them. So the circumstance doesn't require death as a trigger, but yeah, you're right. More often than not, it's a death that would be what's happening for people.
In which, like, as far as I understand, is the main use of the Tibetan Book of the Dead, or maybe also
Mhm.
the American Book of the Dead. That E.J. wrote the American Book of the Dead, right?
Yeah, yeah, and it's
And
just
that's the
it
main
serves
use.
the
Yeah.
same purpose as the Tibetan Book of the Dead, except the Tibetan Book of the Dead was written with Tibetans in mind,
Mhm.
and the American Book of the Dead was written with Westerners in mind, and it
There is also
uses
an Egyptian Book of the Dead too, right?
there's a huge number of books of the deads.
Really?
Calendar of the Shepherds is a book of the dead. There's every single culture has a book of the dead.
Did the Aztec or Toltec culture had one?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. No, I just want to say to you that at the moment we are 2 hours and 50 minutes in our interview. I'm absolutely open and happy to continue if you want more than 3 hours, because I think we can
No, I'm
go
looking.
someplace.
This is getting close to the time when my phone's going to start ringing.
Okay, yeah, we
So,
can maybe finish. I just want to make you aware that if we started at 10:15 Central Time and now is 1:16 Central Time. But I would like to invite you for a new interview so we can continue later if you cannot dedicate more time than 3 hours. Yeah.
yeah, we can address that.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I think this is such an interesting conversation in many levels. So where were you? Where were we before I
Um, we were talking about the ABD.
talk
Um,
about, yeah, the before that we talk about the use of video games. Oh, then you talk about the labyrinth. Can you direct people to interested in looking at this labyrinth readings that you said? It's that a website?
oh, the Labyrinth Readers
Yeah,
Society.
Labyrinth Readers Society.
Yeah,
It's
that's
50 years old.
labyrinthreadersociety.com.
Ah, okay. I'm gonna
And
put
on,
all these links in the description later.
okay, I'll send you some links. And
Okay.
we have a YouTube, not YouTube, a Facebook uh, group page where people make requests for readings or runs.
And those readings can be done remotely. The person can doesn't need to be physically present to the
Well, I
deceased
smile
person, you
because
know.
anytime you read for someone who's passed, it's remote.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, that's true. But I mean, I'm thinking like there's like the human biological machine. There's some sense is still listening, no, when the person is dead
Oh
before
yeah, yeah, but
death.
we the readings go over a course of a period. But you're right. In ideal situations, you would be delivering the readings as someone passes and shortly thereafter. But it turns out that it's not necessary, that course, it goes down to you do what you can do.
Especially if you know about quantum physics, right? It's not necessary to be there in person.
Yeah, because in fact, it doesn't even have to be now. People have asked, well, you know, my uncle died 3 months ago. Can you still do a reading for him? And the answer is yes, because time doesn't work the way you think it does. It's not
Wow.
linear.
Mhm.
So it's still possible to do a delivery of a reading that's needed 3 months ago, our time, for the being,
So
because
the time periods that the bardo talks about, at least the Tibetan bardos, they're more like metaphorical, like those, I think maybe 40 days or something like that.
oh, um,
Uh-oh, you disappeared. Your physical presence just disappeared
yeah, I
from the
got close to the
background.
camera,
Yeah, that
disappeared
was
me.
funny. Suddenly you disappeared.
Yeah, they talk about days, and you think of the days as episodic. It's like metaphorical in a sense. It's not actual dividing up the circumnavigation of the Earth around the sun into 365 chunks of
Probably
time.
like the 6, 7 days that God created the world, right? In the Bible. I'm
So,
just free associating here.
yeah, I mean, if you wake up in the morning and you realize that, oh no, I could still catch another few minutes sleep, and you go back to sleep, and suddenly you have a dream that lasts in the dream for a day, and then you get up and you find out it's only been 5 minutes. Well, what is that day, right?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, so I think we can maybe wrap up for this conversation at least. We have 5 minutes. How do you want to end this conversation for now?
um no particular no particular uh, way to end it that I can think of at this moment.
You want to maybe direct people to your work and the work of EG if they're interested in knowing more?
Well, let's see. My website is xxaxx.com. It's a blog site.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I put any of my, well, let me say what I was going to say and then I'll correct it. That's where I put any of my thoughts on current topics that I'm working with.
Oh,
But I
I'm
have to
interested
amend
in
that.
I'm interested in.
I have to amend that to say any of the topics I'm currently working on that I get around to typing out and putting onto the blog. You'll notice there's gaps, month-long gaps here and there but it is where I do publish things that aren't being put out in book format. And there's, I don't know how many, 15 books on gatewaysbooksandtapes.com on my authors page that you could check out.
That was book specifically created by you, not EJ. That was
No, those
books.
are those are books that I've written, but
Okay, under your
um,
name, Claude
not
Needham. Okay.
without. I mean, I've studied with and I've worked with EJ for 45 years now. So
Did you write any book together with him? Did you guys wrote a book together? Any book?
there's several books that we've written that were he was a contributor, but he's not necessarily listed as an author. Um,
How is EJ nowadays? Just like a little snapshot. We don't have much time. How is he doing nowadays? He's pretty old right now, right? Old age.
yeah, he's getting up there in years, but he's doing well. He continues to be very productive. We just had an amazing workshop this last weekend on give blessings and get blessings. And it was
Give
him giving
blessings and give blessings. That's the name.
give blessings and get blessed.
Oh, give blessings and get blessed. Got
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I gave you the right title in the beginning, but it's give blessings and get blessed.
it. Maybe I didn't
Um,
hear.
so yeah, it was a very good workshop.
And if people are interested, how do they get information about these workshops?
I think not necessarily the best, but a good overview of what's happening with EJ's work can be started by visiting idhhb.com. So it's idhhb.com, Institute for the Development of the Harmonious Human Being.
It reminds me Gurdjieff, huh?
Um, yeah, but it's also kind of a, I don't know, pun, if you will, because what's happening there, it's talking about the fact that you have to be pretty much house trained in order to do this kind of work.
House train? What do you mean house train?
Well, if you have a dog that's always barking and biting and fighting and pooping all over the living room, you don't let him in the house. It's just natural. You just can't afford to. You've got the babies and the kids running around and it's can't hear the TV. So somebody has to be housebroken, meaning that they're able to be in the house. Otherwise, they're a yard dog.
Wait. You use the word house training and now you're using house is broken. I'm a little confused.
Oh, you have to be housebroken. You have to be able to be in a house without breaking the house,
Okay, got it.
right? So that's part of the pun, but also harmonious talks about the fact that it's non-linear. People work on many different tracks at the same time.
You mean in terms of multiple intelligences?
Yeah, multiple lines of work.
Uh-huh.
We'll
Like
work on,
body, artistic, mental, all those.
yes, all of that. Even things like remote viewing. Remote viewing is something that is necessary, but you don't wait until after you've accomplished everything else to start trying remote viewing. You begin that training along with everything else. So,
So your institute, could I say your institute is like a mystery school, something like that?
um, probably, but it's also very pragmatic. Um, and when you say mystery school, I don't know what you mean, and I don't know
More in
what
terms
people
of
hear.
Gurdjieff base, which is, of course, comes the element of practicality too. But it's like I don't know. That's a good question. A mystery school will be like a school where there is like a teacher or a master and some kind of path or teachings that people would benefit by part of being part of the school. No?
Um, yes and no.
Mhm.
Um, there's some places where when you show up, there's a curriculum and you know what you're going to be doing for the next. It's just like going to university. First, you take, well, I'll use my experience with in the sciences. First, you're going to do biology 101 and biology 201. Then you've got your chemistry 101 and you've got physics 101. And then you can move on to chemistry 201 and either go further in physics or switch out into your calculus and then your advanced calculus. You've all these courses and all these things that are laid out. We don't have that. This is more, it's not really seat of the pants, but it's changeable. It mutates with the flux. And we tend to do our training through work. And in this case, I mean just the doing stuff. Maybe working in the garden. There's lessons to be learned being in the dirt, being out there nurturing life, whether it be plant or animal, husbandry. Then there's book distribution we do, and there's lessons to be learned, spiritual
Vi-
lessons to be learned in the
video game production too, right?
video game productions. We
Does the person needs to be somewhat ready or have some specific preparation before joining your institute, or you're open to everybody?
um we're available to anybody, and people quickly determine whether or not they want to stick around. And then after they stick around, they determine whether they want to stick around longer. Um, and there are folks that I suspect are on a spiritual path for which we're not the best fit, but we don't make that judgment. They do.
Is
And
this participation remote or this participation local physically?
it's all remote at this point.
All remote, okay.
Yeah. The reason for it being remote is that it turns out that there's more people that want to work with us that are not able to travel. Their life situation doesn't allow them to travel. Either they can't get visas. In some cases, unfortunately, they can't get visas to the US, but also they have maybe a family and parents that they're caring for, and they're being responsible in that way. So they can't just get up and move out here. So we've
Because at
shifted
one point
away.
you had a little bit of a community of students, right? Or
We did
people
for
interested
quite
in
a
the
while,
work, yeah. Mhm.
but
You don't have
with
that
the
anymore?
internet, with the internet, we've moved away from that. There's still
Okay.
some local folks that uh,
Some
we
old
work together.
timers, some old
Yeah, we work
timers.
together, but most of the people we encounter, they're in a life situation that is conducive for what they're doing, and that's where they are. And they're all over the world. So that's who we're serving at this time. And
How many people approximately are part of your network of students and people interested in what you do? You have a
um,
number?
let's see, that comes in layers. There's
Mhm,
hundreds of thousands that have read the books and are doing whatever it is they're doing with the books.
mhm.
At various points, we've encountered, like there was a group in Malaysia that was working with EJ's books. There was over 350 in the group, 350,000 in that group.
Wait,
It
wait,
was
wait. How many?
350,000. I have no idea what
In
they were doing.
Malaysia?
Yeah.
And do they speak English there?
I know what happened. I found this out from a phone call in which one of the founders of the group called because they needed books for the group, and they ordered one each of the books we had available at which point they translated them and they distributed them among their group.
Oh, got it.
So they were using the material, but they were using it through their own whatever, right?
Oh,
Same thing in Brazil. There was a group of about 100,000 down there. And
oh, wow, 100,000?
yeah, that was Carlos Godo that
Oh,
was
yeah.
leading that. He was
Uh,
very
Carlo,
impressive for,
Carlos Godo.
I believe that's how you spell it. Yeah.
Okay. Claude,
But
first of
his
all,
group, his group, he came up and he got a bunch of materials and continued to work with his groups, but they um that dramatically downsized when he upped the game for them. He
what do you
started
mean?
giving
What do you mean?
he started giving them more serious exposure to the work ideas. And some of the folks that thought they were there for something else ended up going elsewhere for what they were looking for. And he had a smaller but more active group that he was working with. And then we lost contact with them for quite some time. So I don't know what's happening now.
Hmm,
But
hmm.
all of that is by way of saying that there's many people that are being led by others that are using EJ's books. In India, there were 3 ashrams that were working with EJ's lectures and EJ's
Mm,
books as part of
mhm.
their ashram life. And so there's that level, which I don't know, it's maybe 500,000 around the world that are
Oh,
using his
it's a
material.
big influence.
But
And EJ,
we're not in direct communication with them. They're not
yeah, yeah.
showing up weekly or daily. In terms of people that are participating on that level, you can measure it in the hundreds.
And how is the impact of the American Book of Dead that he wrote many decades ago? That's kind of a
Um,
bestseller, no?
yeah,
Or was it?
that particular book is sold, I don't know how many copies. 20 years ago, it was over 250,000 copies were
That's a
sold.
lot. That's a lot for a book, right?
But now it's bound to be much more because of various reasons. I mean, there's been several editions since then, and now there's bootleg versions all over the place. So,
And I'm thinking here, since he has been writing about this for decades, he might have influenced many people in the spiritual and New Age fields in their own writings and their own teachings too, right? Although
EJ,
not being
yeah.
directly acknowledged, yeah. Claude, we are 10 minutes past three o'clock now. What do you prefer? You prefer to continue until your phone keeps calling, or you prefer to finish now?
Oh, we should finish now. We should
Okay,
finish now.
cool. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Um, yeah, I'm inviting already for a continuation when you can, so we can talk about
Okay.
more in there.
And it occurs to me one thing that we could do is if there's any sections that are rough in your edit when you're going through doing the edit, if there's sections that are rough, we can redo those
What do you
sections.
mean? What do you mean rough?
Oh, maybe there's a commingling of things that don't work out in the podcast format, and it would be better if it was relayed down.
I don't know. Usually, I'm just starting, but I'm just letting the conversation goes wherever it goes. And if the person says something that they prefer to not be uh, released in public, then I could cut. But if that's not the case in this conversation, I can just leave the way it is.
Okay.
You know? Okay. And then I send you there, and then, so you can, maybe you can give me some feedback, and then something that needs to be changed. Thank you so
All
much,
right.
and
Take
say hi
care.
to EJ Gold. I really respect the work you're doing, you both.
All right. Bye.
Okay, bye. Thank you.